you struggle with rotating your pelvis in the golf swing, you may be told to do something that is actually the opposite of what good players are doing. I think we can all agree that the pelvis rotates in the swing. I've never heard anyone say otherwise or recommend otherwise. It's kind of how that happens is where the differences come in at. And there's two key movements that I think golfers are being advised not to do that we see every, not most, every great player do. And it's the depth that the hips create as they rotate, and it's the tilt, the forward bend of the pelvis as it rotates.
You know, first of all, you know, one of the things that happens in the golf swing that most people don't understand is what Mike just alluded to there. It's the tilting of the pelvis, anterior, posterior. So, you know, this is an old TPI kind of
Been around for a long time.
movement screen. And when I first did their certification a long time ago, this was one that kind of turned my light bulbs on, like, oh, wow, if you aren't able to make this movement in the swing, you could struggle a little bit making the correct movement patterns.
I'm sure it's still part of the screen.
It is. It's like one of the very first ones. So you would stand there like this, and it looks kind of funny, and you know, you get some laughs, but a lot of times when people do it, so it's just an arching and then a flattening of the lower back, keeping the torso dead still.
Right.
And you know, I can do it. When I first started doing it, when most people do it, they either shake a lot, which is either a restriction or just a motor pattern issue. The brain hasn't taught the muscle, you know, how to make the movement.
Right.
Or they physically, a lot of times I'll ask people to do that, and a lot of people get stuck in anterior as you hip flexors kind of get tight and it puts an arch in your back, right? And people start walking around like that. Well, I'll ask some golfers to do it, and they're like,
they're locked up.
There's nothing there. So
a lot of CrossFitters.
Yeah,
see, yeah.
That tells me, you know, okay, this is something they need to work on if they're going to make a correct hip and pelvis movement during the swing. So now, that's right off the top.
That becomes a problem in the golf swing because so many golfers are fearful of thrusting the pelvis forward, right? That's often called early extension. Not a great term for that. It's just thrust of the pelvis forward. That if I see myself thrust forward in the golf swing, well, the fix for that has to be to tilt my pelvis forward and shove it back.
Yeah, an arch maybe.
An arch. We see a lot of arching in the backswing, right? Because of that.
Yeah, so, you know, what you were trying to do is address here pretty neutral, flattish lower back. So that would be overly arched. That would be the other way, right? Just kind of neutral where your muscles here in your stomach are kind of turned on a little bit, and you just have a flattish lower back. The upper back can round a little. And my thought process when I'm working with people is just try to kind of maintain that feel as you go to the top. Kiss of death would be to lose that and kind of arch, or you don't see too many kind of overly going the other way. Most people will arch it because they're worried about early extension, so they're already adding that piece in there where they arch and shove the hips back.
Yeah, so if you call this movement of tucking the hips under you extension, the extension happens right as soon as the club starts moving for the best players in the world in the backswing.
Well, there's a difference. Yeah, there's a difference between moving the entire unit of the hips forward.
That's the thrust. Yep.
I can arch and tuck my rear end under without moving that entire thing forward. So those are two different things that people get confused.
Right, 100%. Like it's the thrust forward that messes golfers up, but it's kind of camouflaged inside of the rotation. So it's always blamed on the anterior posterior. So the solution for that is the arch and then shove the butt back and really arch like this isn't a great spot. That's not a great spot to be in.
No.
You don't see any good players doing that.
No, we have the measurement. Luckily enough, Gears has a measurement for forward, I think it's called forward and back bend of the pelvis instead of anterior posterior, but you start to see that. Especially the clearest way to see it with good players is if you watch them from about left arm parallel here up into impact, if you start seeing the belt buckle kind of rise, that's that tucking of the pelvis underneath to have that start rising up.
Right, and that's often, the belt buckle rising is often thought of as, you know, the player's jumping. It's the tilt. So you can see, if I'm tilted, I don't know, what's that, 10 degrees, and I flatten that out, if you can only see this club head moves, it looks like my club head
whoa, his hips
is jumping up, but it's
6
just the rotation of the pelvis. The hips do come up a little bit.
Well, you can see how
you're right.
That movement is happening as I turn and straighten my leg. that looks like a lot of up motion in the pelvis, but it's just kind of inside of the body movement this way, not just a jumping action of the whole body.
Okay, so that happens in the backswing and downswing where the pelvis is tucking under.
Yeah, and I don't really ever teach. I would never teach somebody that. I just tell them.
No, we only bring it up when the player is trying to do the opposite.
Exactly. If you just kind of get in a good solid address where this is flat and say, oh, I'm just going to maintain that, and as long as you're not shoving back with the hips, usually it'll make a pretty normal motion.
This is one of those things in the golf swing, you really don't have to address it unless one of the players has been trying to do the opposite way.
Exactly right.
Right, which we see more and more of every week.
And I know this one is a little more high level, but like hang in there with us because it's an important motion in the swing.
Absolutely, it's a power source.
It gives you that look, that tour player look after the hit where things are tucked under here.
Yep.
Instead of being Mr. Havenkamp where you've been trying to keep your hips. If I arched the whole swing, I would look like that. And that's what we're trying to avoid.
That's exactly right. Now, the other pelvis movement that is being advised against is, so if you look down, you imagine I'm holding this facing the camera and you're looking from a top-down view. This is the right side of the pelvis, left side of the pelvis. In the backswing, it's going to rotate closed like this. Okay, notice how I'm rotating around the center of the pelvis. In the downswing, it should rotate around the center of the pelvis. So you see going closer to the ball, going farther away from the ball, and vice versa in the downswing. What we're seeing taught and what players are telling us they've been told is they're trying to go normal backswing and then rotate around the trail hip in the downswing so nothing ever goes back out towards the target line. That's flat out dead wrong.
So let's grab the board there real quick.
Okay.
Now, it's easy to see if you have a prop. Here's our playing board. Soon to be for sale, if not already, depending on when you watch this. Mm-hmm. So neutral, lower back here, top of the swing. What Mike's saying is, as I turn, this hip naturally will get deeper.
Right.
This side of if I had a dot right here, you can see it has its own little swing back there. What Mike's saying is, what's being kind of taught out there is that the right hip stays there and we're going to shove
the left hip
back and then stay there the whole downswing to create space. It just doesn't work like that.
Doesn't work like that. We see golfers do that, again, every week. We're able to measure them. You see the pelvis slow down. You see the pelvis not rotate nearly as good. You see that forward bend increase, right? Again, you get a lot of opposites. This trail side has to be allowed to work forward as the lead side works back. Again, we've got videos a lot on how this lead side moves. The trail side has to move forward, right? You're rotating around the center. It's like a tire. You can't just rotate your tire one side and then have both sides work in the same direction. It's not that complicated. Yeah. And it's going to ruin the whole motion of the pelvis.
Yeah, and you know, the thing you want to try to strive for or what you're looking for when you're watching golf instruction videos is like what's actually happening in good swings. You can put your own feel on that.
You could feel you move the whole body back 7 inches. As long as you're doing the correct things, it's just a matter of perception then.
But I feel like the job of instructors to know what good players are doing, present that information, and then let the player kind of sort out the feels to do that. But if someone is saying to you, push that hip back, and then both hips get pushed back, I learned this a long time ago. You have to be very careful what you tell some people because
a practicer
or a really talented person, they'll do it.
Yeah.
So
very
that
quickly.
whole feel thing falls apart when you're saying, well, it doesn't really work like that because, you know, that people have to feel that. That's not true. That's not true because somebody, a good player, you'll really hurt that way because they're going to be able to do it within 3 swings and now you've ruined that player.
If you told us how your pelvis moved, what you felt, it would be different than what I would describe it as, which would be different than what you would describe it as.
Because we're all coming from a different place.
A different place, different body, different injury, you know,
how
history.
I get to Atlanta from here is different than how you would get to Atlanta coming from Maine.
That's exactly right. So feel is individual. It's your own perception of what you do, nobody else's. The movement is the key. Let the movement dictate the feel. We cannot stress that enough. This especially with how the pelvis moves. So if you haven't subscribed to the channel before we get into the drill section of this, please do so. Helps us out a bunch. Hopefully we've helped you. If we haven't, keep watching. Maybe we'll stumble across a video that does help you. If you're a fan of the channel and you see something in your swing that you don't like and you haven't seen us address it yet, let us know what it is. Or if you just have a question about this video, Let us know down in the comments section. What's a good drill for this?
First things first, I think before you try to do this, let's just make sure you have the movement.
It's kind of important.
Yeah, and there's a lot of different ways to go about it. You could do cats and dogs. I'm not going to go on or cats and cows. I forget what it's called. You could get on the floor and do that. You can Google that. There's a million videos about it. Make sure you have that full range of motion, anterior, posterior, without sacrificing the stability of your torso here. That would be number one. If you can't do it, go find a PT and figure out why.
TPI's got such a great resource for this on their website.
They do. They have exercises. They have drills to go with it. Go check that out. They're ahead of the game on that by a long shot. Now, once you have that kind of baseline movement pattern, that's going to help not only your game, you're going to feel better anyways, because you need that.
So now that you can move.
Everyday life, yeah. You're going to do something like this, and you don't need to hit balls. You can just set up in your living room with your trusty playing board here behind you, and on the backswing, the right side will get into the board here. Coming down, a lot of guys will get a little gap right here in transition just because there's some of that kind of tucking of the rear end going on there, the posterior tilt, right? And then as they straighten their leg, this side naturally, the lead side naturally goes back towards the board. It doesn't need to slam into it, just somewhere near it as the right one comes off. So don't get in this idea that you have to play behind that tush line at address, just somewhere near it without shoving back, and it'll go a long ways towards making a more natural movement, which is better for everybody.
Yeah, this again falls under that category of make swings, not necessarily have to beat balls, because it's so difficult to hit a golf ball and not start to chase what the ball does, especially with something like where you're trying to hardwire how your pelvis moves. Film yourself doing this. It's a great way to do it. Once you can do it without hitting a ball, start to introduce the ball, start to introduce shots, see if you can keep that quality of movement, because understanding how the pelvis moves is step number one. Creating the concept is step number one. That dictates the strategy you start to develop for implementing that concept. And then you're off to the races. You have to spend hours and years like we did doing these frustrating concepts that don't work. Start doing what the best players in the world do, which is actually easier than what the rest of us have been trying to do.